Bear Cub was drifting on broken wood in flooded rapids. What this baby did was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. Rain pounded against the cabin windows as Olivia Reed stared into the fireplace, her fingers absently stroking the strings of her violin. The instrument had collected dust for months now, ever since the accident. Outside, thunder cracked across the sky, shaking the small wooden structure nestled deep in the Adirondack Mountains. Olivia had come here to escape, from the pitying glances, from the whispers, from a world of sound she could no longer fully experience. The doctors had called it sudden sensorineural hearing loss. One morning, Olivia had woken up and half her world had gone silent. For a concert violinist, it was a death sentence. Her right ear, completely deaf. Her left, haunted by constant ringing that distorted every note she tried to play. So she had fled here, to her grandfather's forgotten cabin, where the silence matched her broken spirit. A flash of movement caught her eye through the rain-streaked window. Something small and gray darted across the porch, seeking shelter from the storm. Olivia placed her violin in its case and moved to the window, peering through the glass. There, huddled against the cabin wall, trembled a wolf pup, its fur matted with mud and what looked like blood. Its tiny body heaved with exhausted breaths. Olivia's heart clenched. Without thinking, she grabbed her raincoat and stepped outside. The pup flinched as she approached, baring its tiny teeth in a weak attempt at intimidation. Its left hind leg was badly wounded, possibly broken. "It's okay," Olivia whispered, though she could barely hear her own voice through the storm and her damaged hearing. "I won't hurt you." The pup's eyes, amber and wild with fear, locked onto hers. Somewhere in the distance, a howl cut through the storm, deep, mournful, searching. The mother, Olivia realized, searching for her lost baby. Lightning flashed, illuminating the forest edge. For just a moment, Olivia glimpsed them. 3 larger wolves, watching from the trees, their eyes reflecting the cabin lights. The wounded pup whimpered, trying to stand on its injured leg, desperate to return to its family. Olivia froze. The mother wolf howled again, and something in that sound, a sound so pure and piercing that it somehow cut through Olivia's damaged hearing, stirred something inside her. That cry held music, raw and primal, a mother's desperate song for her child. The rain soaked through Olivia's clothes as she made a decision that would change everything. She would need to help this pup, but not by taking it inside. No, she needed to help it return home, where it belonged. And somehow, in that moment, Olivia knew that in saving this wild creature she might just find a way to save herself too, to find her way back to a world of music she had thought lost forever. The storm raged on as Olivia carefully stepped closer to the injured wolf pup, her hands outstretched, her heart pounding a rhythm that felt, for the first time in months, like the beginning of a new composition. Rain cascaded down Olivia's face as she inched forward, palms open to show she meant no harm. The pup's eyes darted between her and the forest where its family waited, torn between fear and the instinct to flee home. "Easy now," Olivia whispered, her voice nearly lost in the downpour. The pup tried to back away but collapsed with a yelp that pierced Olivia's damaged hearing. That sound, clear as a high note on her violin, startled her. For months, all sounds had been muffled or distorted, but somehow this small creature's cry cut through the fog. Olivia knelt in the mud, rain soaking through her jeans. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a piece of jerky she'd been saving for a hiking trip. She held it out, letting the scent reach the trembling pup. "You need help, little one," she said, "and I think maybe I do too." From the tree line, the mother wolf let out another haunting howl. Olivia felt it reverberate in her chest, though her ears caught only fragments. The pup answered with a whimper, struggling again to stand. Thunder crashed overhead, and the pup cowered, pressing itself against the cabin wall. Olivia seized the moment, moving forward swiftly but gently. She draped her rain jacket over the small creature and scooped it up, expecting resistance. Instead, exhaustion had won out, and the pup lay still in her arms, its small heart racing against her hands. As she straightened, the mother wolf stepped out from the trees, magnificent and terrifying. Their eyes met across the clearing, and Olivia stood perfectly still, the pup cradled against her chest. For what felt like an eternity, they stayed frozen in silent communication. Then, to Olivia's shock, the wolf lowered her head slightly before retreating back into the shadows with the rest of the pack. "I'll take care of him," Olivia promised, though the words were for herself alone. "I'll bring him back to you." Inside the cabin, Olivia laid the pup on a towel by the fire. In the light, she could see the injury clearly, a deep gash along the hind leg, but thankfully not broken as she had feared. She cleaned the wound with gentle hands, speaking softly as she worked. The pup watched her with wary eyes but didn't struggle. "What happened to you out there?" she asked, carefully applying antibiotic ointment from her first aid kit. "Did you fall, or was it something else?" As if in answer, a distant sound echoed through the forest. Gunshots. Olivia's head snapped up. Even with her hearing loss, there was no mistaking that sound. Hunting season wasn't open yet. Whoever was shooting was doing so illegally. The pup trembled at the noise, confirming Olivia's suspicion. Poachers. They must have shot at the wolf pack, and this little one got caught in the crossfire while escaping. Anger flared within her. This remote area was supposed to be a protected wildlife corridor. The cabin's previous owner, her grandfather, had been a forest ranger who'd fought to establish these protections. Now, not only was this pup injured, but its entire family was in danger. The pup licked her hand, drawing her attention back. Those amber eyes seemed to hold a question, and Olivia found herself answering out loud. "Don't worry, I won't let anything happen to your family." She finished bandaging the leg and offered the pup some water and small bits of meat, which it accepted hesitantly. As the pup ate, Olivia went to the cabin's dusty desk and pulled out her grandfather's old maps of the forest. If poachers were operating in the area, she needed to know the terrain. Another series of gunshots rang out, closer this time. The pup whimpered, trying to hide under the coffee table. Olivia's jaw tightened as she spread the maps out. "I know these mountains," she said, tracing the contours with her fingertip. Her grandfather had taught her every trail, every ridge, every hidden valley, and I know who might help us. She reached for her phone, but the storm had knocked out the signal. The landline was dead too. They were completely isolated, just her and the injured wolf pup, with poachers closing in and a wolf pack in danger. Olivia looked at her violin case. Inside was not just her instrument, but also a reminder of everything she'd lost. She hadn't truly played in months, but now those amber eyes watched her expectantly, as if the pup somehow understood she was capable of more than she believed. She opened the case and lifted out the violin, a motion so familiar it felt like greeting an old friend. The instrument seemed to hum with potential energy as she positioned it under her chin. "Let's see if your mother can hear this," Olivia whispered to the pup. She drew the bow across the strings, wincing at first as the distorted sound reached her damaged ear, but she pressed on, playing a simple, haunting melody that rose and fell like a wolf's howl. She poured her frustration, her loss, and her newfound determination into each note. Outside, the storm began to ease, and Olivia's music drifted through the cracks of the old cabin walls out into the night. She closed her eyes, losing herself in the song, when suddenly she felt something extraordinary. The pup was howling softly, harmonizing with her violin. The sound was pure and perfect, cutting through her hearing impairment with crystal clarity. Tears sprang to Olivia's eyes as she continued to play, the pup's voice twining with her music in a duet unlike anything she had ever experienced. In that moment, something broken inside Olivia began to mend. This wasn't about her lost career or damaged hearing. It was about connection, about finding music in unexpected places. And as the pup's howl strengthened, Olivia heard an answering call from the forest, the mother wolf singing back to her child. The map lay forgotten on the desk. Tonight, they would rest and heal. Tomorrow, Olivia would face the poachers and find a way to return the pup to its family. But tonight, in this small cabin in the wilderness, a remarkable symphony was being born, one that transcended species, silence, and loss. Olivia played until her fingers ached, until the pup curled up by the fire and fell into exhausted sleep. Only then did she set down her violin, her heart lighter than it had been in months. "Thank you," she whispered to the sleeping wolf pup, "for helping me remember what music really is." Outside, as if in response, the mother wolf howled once more, a sound that seemed to carry a promise through the night. And for the first time since her hearing loss, Olivia fell asleep with music still echoing clearly in her mind. Morning broke with golden light streaming through the cabin windows. Olivia woke with a start, momentarily disoriented. The events of the night before came rushing back as she spotted the wolf pup, still curled by the now cold fireplace. It was awake, watching her with those intelligent amber eyes. "Good morning," Olivia said softly, surprised again at how clearly she could hear the pup's answering whine. There was something about the animal's vocalizations that bypassed her hearing damage, reaching her in ways other sounds couldn't. She checked the bandage on the pup's leg. The wound looked better already, though it would need time to fully heal. The pup allowed her touch, no longer flinching away. Trust was beginning to form between them. Olivia went to the window and scanned the tree line. No sign of the wolf pack or the poachers. She reached for her phone. Still no signal. They were on their own. As she prepared a simple breakfast, her mind worked through plans. The pup needed at least a few days to heal before it could be returned to its pack. Meanwhile, she needed to find the poachers and stop them, ideally by alerting the authorities. Her grandfather had kept an old CB radio for emergencies. Perhaps she could get it working. The cabin door suddenly rattled with a heavy knock. Olivia froze, heart racing. Nobody knew she was here except her sister, who wasn't expected to visit for weeks. The pup's ears flattened against its head as it limped behind the couch, hiding. Another knock, more insistent this time. "Hello? Anybody in there?" a deep male voice called out. Olivia hesitated, then moved to the door, keeping the chain lock engaged as she opened it a crack. A tall man in a ranger's uniform stood on her porch, his expression grim. "Ma'am, I'm Ranger Jackson Reeves. There have been reports of illegal hunting in this area. Have you heard or seen anything unusual?" Relief washed over Olivia. "Yes, actually. I heard gunshots last night to the north. And..." She paused, unsure whether to mention the wolf pup. What if the ranger's protocol was to take injured wildlife to a facility? The pup needed to return to its family, not end up in captivity. "And what, ma'am?" the ranger pressed, his eyes narrowing slightly. Something in his gaze made Olivia uneasy. His uniform looked correct, but the badge, something wasn't quite right. "And I was concerned," she finished carefully. "My grandfather was Ranger Thomas Reed. He always taught me to report any off-season hunting." The man's expression changed subtly at the mention of her grandfather's name. "Thomas Reed, you say?" "I don't recall a ranger by that name." Olivia's blood ran cold. Every ranger in this district knew her grandfather. He had been a legend in these parts, instrumental in establishing the wolf conservation program. "He retired some years ago," she said, maintaining her composure, despite the alarm bells ringing in her mind. "Is there a number where I can reach the ranger station? My phone has no signal." The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I can radio in your report. May I come in and get the details?" Behind her, Olivia felt rather than heard the pup's low growl. She kept her body positioned to block any view of the cabin interior. "That's kind of you, but I was just heading out for a hike. Perhaps I could stop by the station later today?" She reached for her coat hanging by the door, as if preparing to leave. The fake ranger stepped back, his hand drifting toward his hip, toward what Olivia now realized was a concealed weapon. "I insist," he said, his friendly tone evaporating. "We need to discuss these wolves you've been harboring." Olivia's mind raced. He hadn't seen the pup. He was fishing for information, which meant he suspected but didn't know for certain. He was one of the poachers. "Wolves?" she echoed, feigning confusion. "I haven't seen any wolves, just heard some howling last night, which isn't unusual around here." The man's jaw tightened. "A witness reported seeing lights in this cabin and a woman bringing something small inside during the storm. Around the same time, my hunting party lost track of an injured wolf cub we were monitoring." Hunting party, monitoring. His euphemisms for poaching made Olivia's anger flare, but she kept her expression neutral. "Must have been a different cabin. I only arrived this morning." The lie came easily, necessary to protect the vulnerable creature behind her. For a tense moment the man stared at her, evaluating. Olivia held her ground, heart hammering in her chest. Finally, he stepped back. "My mistake, then. Enjoy your hike, Miss—" "Parker," Olivia lied. "Claire Parker?" He nodded, touching the brim of his hat. "Miss Parker, be careful out there. Wild animals can be dangerous, especially wolves." The threat was thinly veiled. As he turned to leave, Olivia noticed a radio on his belt crackle with static, followed by a voice. "Any sign of the cub, Decker? Those buyers won't wait forever." The man, Decker, quickly silenced the radio, shooting Olivia a cold look before striding away toward a mud-splattered truck parked down the road. Olivia closed and locked the door, then leaned against it, knees weak with relief and fear. The wolf pup emerged from hiding, limping to her side and pressing against her leg as if offering comfort. "That was close," she whispered, kneeling to stroke the pup's head. "But now we know what we're dealing with. They're not just hunting wolves, they're capturing them. For buyers. The wildlife black market. She'd read about it, endangered species sold to private collectors, exotic pet enthusiasts, or worse. A rare wolf pup from a protected area would fetch a high price. Olivia went to the window and watched Decker's truck disappear down the mountain road. They wouldn't have much time. Once he confirmed with his witness about the timing, he'd know she had lied. They would be back, and in greater numbers. "We need to move quickly," she told the pup, who watched her with those trusting amber eyes. "I need to get you back to your family and get help before those men find the pack." She grabbed her grandfather's maps again, studying them with new purpose. There was an old fire lookout tower about 3 miles up the mountain. It would have a radio with better range than the cabin's ancient CB. If she could reach that, she could contact real authorities. But first, she needed to find the wolf pack. The pup needed its family, and the family needed warning about the poachers. Olivia packed quickly. First aid supplies, food, water, a compass, and her grandfather's old service revolver, which she found locked in his desk drawer. She had never fired it, but its weight was reassuring, given what they were facing. Last, almost as an afterthought, she packed her violin. The pup watched her preparations, becoming agitated when she opened her backpack. "Don't worry," she told it gently. "You're coming with me." She fashioned a sling from a soft blanket and carefully lifted the pup into it. The animal settled against her chest, seemingly understanding that Olivia was its best chance at returning home. Before leaving, Olivia went to her grandfather's desk one last time. In the bottom drawer, beneath old logbooks and reports, she found what she was looking for: her grandfather's journal documenting the local wolf packs. If anyone knew where to find the pup's family, it would be Thomas Reed. The last entry was dated just a month before his passing, describing a pack of 5 wolves living in a den near Wolf Creek Falls. The location was marked on his handwritten map, about 2 miles from the cabin, in the opposite direction from the fire tower. Olivia faced a choice: head directly to the fire tower for help, or first try to find the wolf pack to return the pup and warn them. Either way, she would be exposed on the mountain trails, potentially crossing paths with the poachers. The pup nuzzled against her neck, its warm breath a reminder of the trust placed in her. Wolf Creek Falls it is, Olivia decided. Let's find your family. She slipped out the back door of the cabin, staying within the tree line to avoid being spotted from the road. The forest was dense here, old-growth pines creating a cathedral-like canopy overhead. As they moved deeper into the woods, Olivia felt a strange sense of homecoming. These mountains had been her playground as a child, before music had taken her away to concert halls and cities. The pup grew restless in the sling as they walked, its nose working to catch familiar scents. Occasionally, it would whine softly, and each time Olivia found herself able to hear it with surprising clarity. About a mile into their journey, the pup suddenly tensed, its ears pricking forward. A moment later, Olivia heard it too. Voices ahead, men talking in low tones. She froze, then carefully stepped off the trail into a thicket of dense undergrowth. Through the leaves, she could make out 3 men in camo gear, rifles slung over their shoulders. One was Decker, the fake ranger. They were studying something on the ground. Tracks, she realized. Wolf tracks. "Pack's moving north," one of the men said, pointing. "Probably spooked after we got the cub." "We need that cub back," Decker responded, his voice carrying clearly to Olivia's hiding spot. "The buyer specifically wants a family unit, alpha pair and offspring. Without the cub, the deal's off." "What about the woman at the cabin?" the third man asked. Decker spat on the ground. "She was lying. My gut says she has the cub. We'll deal with her after we track down the pack. Once we have them tranquilized and caged, we'll go back for the cub." Olivia's hand instinctively tightened around the pup, who seemed to sense the danger and remained perfectly still against her. "Let's move," Decker ordered. "They're heading toward the falls. We can cut them off at Ridgeline Pass." The men continued north, following the wolf tracks. Olivia waited until they were well out of sight before emerging from her hiding place, mind racing. The poachers were heading to intercept the wolf pack at Ridgeline Pass, but according to her grandfather's map, there was another way to reach Wolf Creek Falls. A steeper, more difficult path, but one that might get her there first. "Change of plans," she whispered to the pup. "We need to warn your family." She veered east toward a barely visible game trail that snaked up a rocky slope. It was a strenuous climb, made more difficult by the weight of the pup and her pack, but Olivia pushed on, driven by urgency. As they ascended, the forest thinned, giving way to rocky outcroppings that offered glimpses of the valley below. Olivia paused at one such viewpoint, catching her breath. From here, she could see the main trail where the poachers had gone, winding its way toward a distant ridge. Beyond that lay Wolf Creek Falls, hidden from view by the mountains. The pup grew increasingly alert as they climbed higher, its nose working constantly. Suddenly, it let out a soft, high-pitched whine, a sound so clear that Olivia's damaged hearing caught it perfectly. The pup was calling out, and from somewhere up ahead came an answering howl. "They're close," Olivia breathed, her heart leaping. "Your family is near." She quickened her pace, following the increasingly excited pup's cues. The game trail led them through a narrow pass between two rocky cliffs, then descended sharply toward the sound of rushing water. Wolf Creek Falls was just ahead. The forest opened into a small clearing beside a thundering waterfall. The water cascaded down 100-foot drop into a clear pool below, surrounded by moss-covered rocks and lush vegetation. It was breathtakingly beautiful and empty of wolves. Olivia's heart sank. Had they missed them? Had the pack already moved on? Perhaps spooked by the poachers following their trail? The pup struggled in its sling, clearly wanting to be set down. Carefully, Olivia lowered it to the ground, watching as it tested its injured leg. The bandage was holding, and the pup could put some weight on the leg now, though it still limped considerably. The pup hobbled to the edge of the clearing and let out another call, louder this time, more urgent. For several tense moments, there was no response. Then, from the shadows beyond the clearing, a pair of eyes appeared, followed by another and another. The wolf pack emerged slowly from the forest, the mother wolf in front, her silver-gray coat shimmering in the dappled sunlight. Behind her came 3 more wolves, 2 adults and a half-grown adolescent. They approached cautiously, eyes fixed on Olivia, even as the injured pup limped toward them. Olivia stood perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe. The mother wolf stopped several yards away, assessing the human who had brought back her child. The pup continued forward until it reached its mother, who immediately began to inspect the bandaged leg, sniffing carefully at Olivia's handiwork. "He's going to be okay," Olivia said softly, "but you're all in danger. There are men coming, hunters with guns and cages." As if understanding her words, the mother wolf raised her head, amber eyes eerily similar to her pup's, fixed on Olivia's face. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, they regarded each other. The human musician with damaged hearing, and the wild wolf protecting her family. Then, to Olivia's astonishment, the mother wolf took a step toward her, then another. The rest of the pack remained on alert, watching intently as their leader approached the human. When only a few feet separated them, the wolf stopped, her gaze never leaving Olivia's. Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding, a connection that transcended species. Olivia felt it like music, like the perfect harmony of strings resonating together. The moment was shattered by the distant crack of a rifle shot, followed by shouting voices. The poachers had reached Ridgeline Pass sooner than expected, and were beginning their descent toward the falls. The wolf pack instantly tensed, the mother backing away toward her returned pup and the rest of her family. They were preparing to flee, but Olivia knew the poachers would be expecting that. With their high-powered rifles and knowledge of the terrain, the wolves would be easy targets in the open areas they would need to cross to escape. In a flash of inspiration, Olivia reached for her violin case. The wolves paused, watching as she withdrew the instrument and positioned it under her chin. "Trust me," she whispered and began to play. The melody was nothing she had ever played before, wild and haunting, mimicking the wolves' own howls, but with a human complexity woven through. It was music born of these mountains, of moonlight on snow and wind through pines. Despite her hearing impairment, Olivia had never played more perfectly, more powerfully. And as the music rose above the sound of the waterfall, the wolves listened, heads tilted in curiosity. The mother wolf's eyes never left Olivia's face. When Olivia changed the melody, making it sharp and driving, the mother wolf seemed to understand. She turned to her pack and led them, not away from the falls, but toward a narrow path that wound behind the curtain of water, a hidden route that the poachers wouldn't know to watch. Olivia continued playing, her music growing louder to mask the sounds of the wolves' retreat. The pup hesitated, looking back at her with those intelligent eyes before limping after its family. As the last wolf disappeared behind the waterfall, Olivia lowered her violin. In the distance, the voices of the poachers grew closer. She had succeeded in helping the pack escape, but now she herself was exposed, alone in the clearing with the poachers approaching. She had a decision to make. She could try to hide, to make her own escape back down the mountain. Or she could stand her ground, creating a diversion that would give the wolf pack more time to put distance between themselves and their pursuers. The choice was clear. Olivia Reed had spent months hiding from her new reality, running from the silence that had invaded half her world. She was done running. She positioned her violin once more and began to play, not a wilderness melody this time, but Vivaldi's Summer from the Four Seasons, the storm movement. It was fierce and chaotic, her fingers flying over the strings as the music echoed off the rocks surrounding the waterfall. Let the poachers come. Let them find her here. Every minute they spent dealing with her was another minute the wolves gained for their escape. Decker was the first to emerge into the clearing, rifle raised, his false ranger uniform discarded for hunting camouflage. He stopped short at the sight of Olivia playing her violin beside the waterfall, his expression shifting from surprise to anger as he realized what had happened. "Where are they?" he demanded, signaling for his companions to search the area. "Where are the wolves?" Olivia continued playing, the music building to a crescendo as she met his gaze without flinching. In this moment, with her violin in hand and purpose in her heart, she feared nothing. "Gone," she said simply when she finally lowered her bow. "And you won't find them." Decker's face contorted with rage as his men returned, confirming the wolves were nowhere to be found. He stalked toward Olivia, finger on the trigger of his rifle. "Do you have any idea what you've cost me?" he snarled. That pack was worth over 100,000 to the right buyer. "They're worth far more than that to the forest," Olivia replied, her voice steady. "To the balance of this ecosystem, to the legacy my grandfather worked his entire life to protect." Decker laughed, a harsh sound that echoed across the clearing. "Your grandfather, Thomas Reed, I should have known. The old man was always a thorn in our side, shutting down our operations, reporting us to the feds." He raised his rifle, pointing it at Olivia's chest. At least I'll have the satisfaction of dealing with the last of the Reed problem." "Oh." Olivia stood her ground, violin still in hand. She wasn't afraid, not of this man, not of what might happen next. For the first time since losing her hearing, she felt fully alive, fully herself. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," came a new voice from the edge of the clearing. All heads turned to see a group of uniformed rangers emerging from the forest, real ones this time, weapons drawn and aimed at the poachers. "Drop your weapons," ordered the lead ranger, a stern-faced woman with a chief's badge. You're surrounded and under arrest for illegal hunting in a protected wildlife corridor, impersonating a federal officer and threatening a civilian." Decker hesitated, his rifle still trained on Olivia. For a heart-stopping moment, she thought he might pull the trigger anyway, take her down before surrendering. Then, with a curse, he lowered his weapon. As the Rangers moved in to handcuff the poachers, the chief approached Olivia. "Miss Reed, I'm Chief Ranger Martinez. We got a call at the station about poachers in the area." She glanced at the violin in Olivia's hands. "Unusual circumstances brought us here. Our radio operator reported picking up what sounded like violin music being broadcast on our emergency frequency. When we traced the signal, it led us to you." Olivia looked down at her violin in confusion. "I don't understand. I was just playing to distract them. I wasn't broadcasting anything." Chief Martinez smiled. "You might want to check that old fire tower up on the ridge sometime. Your grandfather installed some interesting modifications to the amplification system before he retired. Something about using music to track wolf migrations." She looked around the clearing. "Speaking of which, we got reports of wolf activity in this area. Any sign of them?" Olivia thought of the mother wolf's amber eyes, so like her pups, and the moment of understanding that had passed between them. "They were here," she said truthfully, "but they've moved on to somewhere safer, somewhere they can heal and be together." As the Rangers led the poachers away, Chief Martinez invited Olivia to join them back at the station to give a formal statement. Olivia agreed, but asked for a moment alone by the waterfall first. When everyone had gone, Olivia stood in the clearing, listening to the rush of water over rocks. She raised her violin one last time and played a simple, gentle melody, a lullaby her mother had sung to her as a child. From somewhere beyond the waterfall, barely audible over the rushing water, came the answering howl of a wolf, clear and perfect in Olivia's damaged hearing. She smiled and lowered her violin. The wolves were safe. And somehow, in saving them, she had found something she thought lost forever. Not just music, but purpose. Her hearing might never fully recover, but she had discovered a new way of listening, a new kind of music born from connection and courage. As Olivia turned to follow the Rangers down the mountain, she felt lighter than she had in months. Tomorrow, she would call her orchestra director. Her career wouldn't be the same, but perhaps it could be something new, something that bridged the world of human music and wild song. The setting sun painted the waterfall in shades of gold and amber as Olivia left the clearing. Behind her, hidden in the shadows beyond the curtain of water, watchful eyes followed her departure, amber eyes filled with a wild, knowing intelligence. And in the silent symphony that passed between them, both human and wolf understood they would meet again. 2 weeks later, Olivia stood on the porch of her grandfather's cabin, now truly her own. She had spent the days after the incident giving statements to wildlife officials, park rangers, and federal agents investigating the international animal trafficking ring that Decker and his crew had been part of. The poachers now faced serious federal charges, and the wolf pack had been officially designated for special protection status. Olivia raised her violin to her chin, adjusted her new hearing aid, specially calibrated to help compensate for her unique hearing loss, and began to play as the sun set behind the mountains. The melody was one she had been composing since returning to the city briefly to pack up her apartment and resign from the symphony. Wolf Song, she called it, a piece that mimicked the howls and harmonies she had heard in that clearing by the waterfall. As the music floated across the valley, she watched the tree line. For several evenings now she had played at sunset, and each time she had been rewarded with the same sight. The wolf pack emerging at the forest edge, just long enough to listen before disappearing back into their wild domain. Tonight was no different. As she played the final movement of her composition, they appeared. 5 wolves, including the pup, its leg now healed, standing tall beside its mother. They watched her from a distance that respected both her world and theirs. Olivia had made a choice not to domesticate or tame these wild creatures. They belonged to the forest, to freedom. But in the music they shared, they had found a connection that needed no translation. As the last note faded into the twilight, the mother wolf raised her head and howled, a sound so pure that it cut through Olivia's hearing impairment as if it had never existed. The rest of the pack joined in, creating a harmony that no human orchestra could match. Olivia lowered her violin and listened, truly listened, to the wild symphony surrounding her. Her new life was just beginning, teaching music at the small local college, composing pieces inspired by the wilderness, working with her grandfather's old colleagues on wolf conservation projects. It wasn't the career she had planned, but standing here now, she couldn't imagine wanting anything else. The wolves melted back into the forest as darkness fell, but Olivia knew they would return. In losing what she thought defined her, she had discovered a deeper music, one that connected all living things in a symphony as ancient as the mountains themselves. And as she turned to go inside, violin case in hand, and the wolves' song still echoing in her heart, Olivia Reed was finally, completely, home. The morning sun filtered through the cabin windows as Olivia prepared her lesson plans for the local college music class. Her phone buzzed with a text from Chief Martinez. "Need to speak with you. Something strange happening with the radio equipment. Can you come to the station?" Intrigued, Olivia set aside her work and drove down the mountain road. The ranger station was a modest building that served as the hub for all wildlife protection activities in the region. Chief Martinez met her at the entrance, her expression puzzled rather than concerned. "Thanks for coming, Olivia. Since last week, our radio operators have been picking up unusual transmissions. Not voices, but—" She paused, seeming to search for the right words. "Musical patterns, rhythmic sounds that come and go. We've traced them to your grandfather's old fire tower." Olivia's pulse quickened. "The tower with the amplification system?" "Exactly. We thought it might be a malfunction, but the patterns are too deliberate, too structured. One of my rangers, who happens to be a musician, says they sound like responses to something." They entered the communications room where a young ranger sat hunched over the radio equipment, headphones pressed to his ears. He looked up as they approached. "Ma'am, it's happening again," he said to Chief Martinez, then nodded to Olivia. "You're the violinist, right? You need to hear this." He unplugged the headphones, and strange sounds filled the room. They were indeed musical. Not human music, but something wilder, more primal. Patterns of howls and whines that seemed to follow a complex rhythm. "When did this start?" Olivia asked, leaning closer to the equipment. "About 2 weeks ago," the ranger replied. "Right after the incident with the poachers. It comes in waves, usually at dawn and dusk." Olivia felt goosebumps rise on her arms. Dawn and dusk, the same time she played her violin on the cabin porch. The times when the wolf pack would emerge to listen. "I need to visit that fire tower," she said. Chief Martinez nodded. "I was hoping you'd say that. Your grandfather left very specific instructions about the modifications he made, but none of us could ever fully understand them. Maybe you can make sense of it." The drive to the old fire tower took them deeper into the mountains, following a barely maintained service road that wound through dense forest. As they climbed higher, Olivia noticed something odd. Fresh wolf tracks alongside the road, far more than she'd expect to see. The tower itself stood on a rocky promontory, a weathered metal structure that had watched over these forests for decades. At its base was a small equipment shed, its door secured with a heavy padlock that Chief Martinez unlocked with a key from her ring. Inside, Olivia gasped. The walls were covered with her grandfather's handwriting. Equations, musical notations, and detailed diagrams of what looked like sound wave patterns. In the center sat an ancient radio transmitter, but it had been extensively modified with additional components she didn't recognize. He was obsessed with this project in his final years, Chief Martinez said softly. Called it his translation system. We thought it was just the wanderings of an aging mind, but Olivia approached the equipment, running her fingers over the modifications. There were frequency modulators, signal processors, and what looked like custom-built amplifiers. Everything was connected in a complex web that somehow made perfect sense to her musical mind. A notebook lay open on the desk. Olivia recognized her grandfather's precise handwriting. The wolves have their own language, not words, but pure emotion expressed through sound. Music is the bridge. If we could translate between the two. Her hands trembled as she turned the pages, finding more notes about wolf vocalizations, frequency ranges, and harmonic patterns. Her grandfather had been trying to create a system that could interpret wolf communication and translate it into something humans could understand, and vice versa. "Look at this," she breathed, pointing to a diagram. He mapped the emotional content of different wolf calls to musical intervals. A rising fifth for greeting, a minor third for warning, complex harmonies for family bonds. Chief Martinez leaned over her shoulder. "So, the patterns we've been hearing, are wolves using the system?" Olivia finished. "They've learned to interact with it somehow." As if responding to her words, the radio crackled to life. The strange musical patterns flowed through the speakers, but now Olivia heard them differently. This wasn't random noise, it was communication. She grabbed a pencil and began transcribing the patterns into musical notation, her trained ear picking out the intervals and rhythms. As she worked, a picture emerged, not words, but emotions and concepts expressed through pure sound. "They're calling," she whispered. "Multiple packs from different territories. They're gathering?" Chief Martinez's radio buzzed. "Chief, we've got unusual wolf activity throughout the region. Packs moving toward the Central Valley. Numbers we've never seen before." Olivia and the chief exchanged worried glances. Mass wolf movements were extremely rare and usually indicated a major environmental threat: forest fires, disease, or human encroachment. "We need to get to higher ground for a better view," Chief Martinez decided. The tower platform. They climbed the metal stairs to the observation platform at the top of the fire tower. From this height, they could see for miles across the forested valleys. What they saw took their breath away. Wolves. Dozens of them, perhaps more, moving through the forests below in organized groups. Not just one pack, but multiple packs traveling in the same direction, toward the large meadow that lay at the heart of the protected area. "This is unprecedented," Chief Martinez murmured. "Wolves are territorial. Different packs don't gather like this unless—" She was interrupted by a sound that made Olivia's damaged hearing ring with crystal clarity. A chorus of howls rising from the forest below. But these weren't ordinary howls. They followed the same structured patterns she had heard on the radio, the same musical language her grandfather had tried to decode. "They're using the translation system to communicate across pack boundaries," Olivia realized. "My grandfather didn't just create a way for us to understand them. He gave them a way to understand each other." As they watched, more wolves emerged from the tree lines, all converging on the central meadow. Among them, Olivia spotted a familiar silver-gray form, the mother wolf from the waterfall, her pup running beside her. "I need to go down there," Olivia said. Chief Martinez looked at her as if she'd lost her mind. "Into a gathering of multiple wolf packs? That's suicide." "No," Olivia said with growing certainty. "They're not gathering for hunting or territory. This is something else. Something connected to the music, to the communication system. I need my violin." Against Chief Martinez's protests, Olivia descended the tower and retrieved her violin case from the truck. The chief insisted on accompanying her, along with 2 armed rangers for protection, as they made their way toward the meadow. As they approached through the trees, the sight that greeted them was both terrifying and magnificent. At least 50 wolves had gathered in the open space, arranged in distinct family groups but maintaining peaceful distances. At the center of the meadow stood a massive black wolf, clearly ancient, with a grizzled muzzle and scars telling of many years survived. "The Patriarch," Chief Martinez whispered. "We thought he was just a legend, the oldest alpha in the region, from the original pack your grandfather studied 30 years ago." The old wolf's yellow eyes fixed on their group as they emerged from the tree line. Every wolf in the meadow turned to watch. Olivia felt the weight of dozens of predator gazes, but surprisingly no fear. There was an intelligence in those eyes, a purpose that went beyond simple animal instinct. Slowly, carefully, Olivia stepped forward and raised her violin. The rangers tensed, weapons ready, but the wolves remained still, watching. She began to play, not one of her composed pieces, but an improvisation based on the pattern she had heard through the radio, the musical language her grandfather had discovered. As the notes rang out across the meadow, the wolves responded. It started with the Patriarch, a deep, resonant howl that set the pattern. Then others joined in, each pack adding their voice to create a layered symphony. The sound was overwhelming, primal, yet structured in a way that spoke of intelligence and purpose. Through her damaged hearing, Olivia could perceive the music more clearly than ever. She adjusted her playing, following the wolves' lead, becoming part of their communication network. And suddenly, she understood. Images flooded her mind, not visual, but emotional impressions carried by the sound. Memories of the forest, passed down through generations. The encroachment of humans, the loss of territory, the broken connections between packs, and something more, a warning. Olivia lowered her violin, gasping. "They're trying to tell us something, about the forest, about danger coming." The Patriarch stepped forward, his ancient eyes meeting hers. He howled once more, a specific pattern she recognized from her grandfather's notes, the call for truth-sharing, a legendary behavior where wolves would communicate critical survival information across pack boundaries. Chief Martinez's radio crackled urgently. "Chief, you need to hear this. The Geological Survey team just reported unusual seismic activity in the region. They're detecting underground instabilities that could indicate—" The transmission cut off, replaced by static. But Olivia already knew what the wolves were trying to communicate. The gathering, the mass movement, the urgent calls through the translation system. They were warning of a natural disaster. "The mountain," she breathed. "They're sensing something we can't. Earthquake, landslide, something that threatens the entire ecosystem." As if confirming her words, a low rumble shook the ground beneath their feet. Trees swayed, and birds erupted from the forest canopy. The wolves remained calm but alert, their formation shifting as family groups prepared to move. The Patriarch approached Olivia, stopping just feet away. This close, she could see the intelligence in those ancient eyes, the weight of knowledge carried through generations. He howled once more, a clear, commanding call that every wolf in the meadow echoed. Then, as one, the packs began to move. Not in panic, but with purposeful coordination, heading toward higher ground to the east, away from the most unstable areas the wolves had somehow sensed. "We need to evacuate the valleys," Chief Martinez said urgently. "If the wolves are right—" Another rumble, stronger this time. In the distance, they could hear the crack of breaking trees and shifting rock. "The town," Olivia said. "Riverside is directly in the path if there's a major landslide. We need to warn them." But the radio systems were still filled with static, the geological disturbance interfering with communications. The nearest town with hundreds of people lay in a valley that could become a death trap if the mountainside gave way. The mother wolf Olivia had helped appeared at her side, the healed pup beside her. She looked up at Olivia, then toward the direction of the town, and back again. The message was clear. The wolves knew about the human settlement, too. "The translation system," Olivia said suddenly. "If it can amplify and transmit wolf calls, maybe we can modify it to broadcast on emergency frequencies." Chief Martinez nodded. "It's worth a try. Can you make it back to the fire tower?" "I'll need help, and we'll need to work fast." As they raced back through the forest, the ground continued to shake intermittently. Trees groaned and rocks tumbled from the higher elevations. The wolves had bought them time with their warning, but nature's clock was ticking. At the fire tower, Olivia and the ranger who understood music worked frantically to modify the transmission system. Using her grandfather's notes and her own musical knowledge, she reconfigured the equipment to convert the wolf warning patterns into a signal that could break through the interference. "Try it now," she said. The ranger flipped switches and suddenly the static cleared. Chief Martinez grabbed the microphone. "Emergency broadcast to all stations. This is Chief Ranger Martinez. Evacuate all valley settlements immediately. Major geological event imminent. This is not a drill." As the warning went out, Olivia looked through the tower window. The wolf packs were still visible in the distance, moving steadily toward safety, their ancient knowledge serving them as it had for countless generations. She thought of her grandfather, of his vision to bridge the gap between human and wolf, and realized he had succeeded in ways he never imagined. The translation system hadn't just helped humans understand wolves, it had allowed the wolves to save human lives. Another massive rumble shook the tower. Through the window, they could see a portion of the distant mountainside beginning to slide. They had minutes, maybe less. "We need to go. Now," Chief Martinez ordered. As they descended the tower stairs, Olivia grabbed her grandfather's journal and the most critical equipment components. This knowledge was too valuable to lose. They made it to the vehicles just as the landslide began in earnest. As they raced down the mountain road, Olivia looked back to see tons of rock and earth cascading down the mountainside, directly toward where the town would have been if not for the evacuation warning. The radio crackled with reports. The evacuation was succeeding. People were reaching high ground. Lives were being saved because the wolves had shared their knowledge and because one old ranger had built a bridge between two worlds. Hours later, as the dust settled and the extent of the damage became clear, Olivia stood with Chief Martinez overlooking the devastation. The valley where Riverside had stood was buried under tons of debris, but the town's residents were safe, evacuated in time thanks to the wolves' warning. "The geological team is calling it a once-in-a-century event," Chief Martinez said. "Underground water erosion combined with recent heavy rains created a perfect storm of instability. Without the early warning—" She didn't need to finish. They both knew what the casualty count would have been. In the distance, on a ridge overlooking the changed landscape, Olivia saw them, the wolf packs, still organized in their family groups, watching the human activity below. The patriarch stood apart, his silhouette majestic against the setting sun. Olivia raised her hand in acknowledgement, and could have sworn the old wolf dipped his head in return before turning and leading his extended pack into the deeper forests. They would adapt to the changed landscape, as they always had. "What will you do now?" Chief Martinez asked. Olivia looked down at her grandfather's journal, then at her violin case. "Continue his work. The translation system proved its worth today, but there's so much more to learn. The wolves have knowledge we need, about the forest, about survival, about reading the signs of the natural world." She thought of her damaged hearing, once seen as a career-ending disability, now revealed as a unique gift that allowed her to perceive the wolves' musical language in ways others couldn't. "There's talk of expanding the protected areas, creating corridors between territories so the packs can communicate better," Chief Martinez said. "We'll need scientific backing, research data, and someone who can speak their language," Olivia finished. "Looks like I found my new calling after all." As they headed back down the mountain, Olivia's phone buzzed with a text from her sister in the city. "Saw the news about the landslide and evacuation. Thank God everyone's safe. How did they know to evacuate in time?" Olivia smiled, thinking of the patriarch's ancient eyes, the mother wolf's fierce protectiveness, and the pup who had brought two worlds together. "We had some very good teachers," she texted back. The sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. Somewhere in the forest, wolves howled, not in warning this time, but in celebration of survival, of community, and of the growing understanding between two species who shared the same wild home. Olivia Reed had come to these mountains seeking silence and solitude in her grief. Instead, she had found a new voice, a new purpose, and a connection that transcended the boundaries between human and wild. Her grandfather's dream lived on, stronger than ever, in the song shared between wolves and the woman who had learned to hear their truth. The next morning brought crews of scientists, government officials, and media to document the massive geological event and the miraculous evacuation that had saved so many lives. Olivia found herself at the center of it all, explaining the wolf communication system and her grandfather's pioneering work. But as helicopters buzzed overhead and cameras rolled, she noticed the absence of the wolves. The forest seemed empty of their presence, the packs having retreated deeper into the wilderness to avoid the human chaos. That evening, as the crowds finally dispersed, Olivia returned to her cabin. She was exhausted but restless, her mind churning with the implications of what had happened. The translation system had proven invaluable, but it was still primitive compared to what it could become. She opened her grandfather's journal to a section she hadn't fully explored. Pages near the end filled with theoretical equations and concepts that had seemed like fantasy before. Now, with her experience fresh in her mind, the ideas took on new meaning. "The neural patterns of musical perception," she read aloud. "Cross-species emotional mapping through frequency resonance. The possibility of direct consciousness interface." Her grandfather had been working on something far more ambitious than simple translation. He had been exploring the possibility of true communication, not just understanding what the wolves were saying, but sharing thoughts, memories, perhaps even experiences. A soft whine from the porch interrupted her reading. Olivia opened the door to find the young wolf, the pup she had saved, now grown stronger and more confident. But it wasn't alone. Behind it stood two other young wolves, watching her warily. The pup approached, and Olivia noticed something glinting on a leather cord around its neck. Her heart skipped as she recognized it, one of her grandfather's research tags, but modified. The small device attached to it was unlike anything in his notes. Carefully, she knelt and examined the device. It was incredibly sophisticated, with components she couldn't immediately identify, but as she touched it, she felt a strange, tingling sensation, and suddenly, images flooded her mind. The device wasn't her grandfather's work. It was something the wolves had created or discovered or been given. The images showed ancient caves deep in the mountains, walls covered with symbols that looked almost like musical notation. Wolves gathering there for generations, drawn by something that enhanced their natural communication abilities. "You're showing me something," Olivia whispered. "Something you want me to see." The pup turned and began walking toward the forest, pausing to look back at her. The message was clear. Follow. Despite the late hour and her exhaustion, Olivia grabbed her backpack, flashlight, and violin. She left a note for Chief Martinez and followed the young wolves into the darkening forest. They led her on paths she didn't know existed, deeper into the mountains than she had ever ventured. The terrain was challenging, but the wolves adjusted their pace to match hers, waiting patiently when she needed to rest. After hours of hiking, they arrived at what looked like a solid rock face, but the lead wolf squeezed through a barely visible crack, and Olivia realized it was the entrance to a cave system. Inside, the passages opened into a vast chamber that took her breath away. The walls were indeed covered with symbols, not quite writing, not quite music, but something in between. And there, in the center of the chamber, sat a structure that defied explanation. It was made of crystal and metal, clearly artificial, but of no design she recognized. It hummed with energy, and as she approached, her damaged hearing suddenly cleared completely. Every sound in the cave became crystal sharp. The drip of water, the wolves breathing, even her own heartbeat. The young wolf approached the structure and howled, a specific pattern Olivia recognized from the translation system. The structure responded, glowing brighter, and suddenly the chamber filled with harmonics that seemed to come from the very stones themselves. Olivia gasped as understanding flooded through her. This wasn't just a communication device, it was something far older, far more advanced. The symbols on the walls told a story of first contact between species, of knowledge shared across impossible gulfs of understanding. Her grandfather had discovered not the beginning, but the continuation of something ancient. The wolves had been guardians of this knowledge, waiting for humans to develop enough to comprehend it. She approached the structure, violin in hand, and began to play. The young wolf howled along, and together they created harmonies that activated deeper levels of the device. The walls themselves began to resonate, and information flowed directly into Olivia's consciousness. Images of the past, wolves and early humans learning from each other, knowledge of the future, environmental changes that would require both species to work together to survive. And something more, a map of similar sites around the world, each guarded by different species, each holding pieces of a larger puzzle. The communication system her grandfather had built was just the first step. This chamber, this ancient technology, was designed to create true understanding between all Earth's intelligent species, and the time for its activation was now, as the planet faced challenges that no single species could survive alone. The vision faded, leaving Olivia shaking with the magnitude of what she had learned. The young wolf pressed against her side, offering comfort and support. They were no longer just two different species sharing a moment. They were partners in something much larger. Outside the cave, dawn was breaking. As they emerged, Olivia saw wolves gathering again. Not just local packs, but individuals from distant territories, all drawn by the activation of the ancient site. Her phone, surprisingly, had signal here. It immediately flooded with messages. The geological event that had threatened the town was just the beginning. similar instabilities were being detected worldwide. Climate patterns were shifting dramatically. The challenges her vision had shown were already beginning. But now humanity wouldn't face them alone. The wolves, and apparently other species as well, had been preparing for this moment for generations. The translation system was just the first bridge. What came next would require trust, cooperation, and understanding on a scale never before attempted. Olivia looked at the young wolf beside her, then at the gathering packs, and finally at the rising sun painting the mountains gold. Her journey had begun with personal loss and the search for silence. It had led her to discover a voice she never knew she had, and a purpose that spanned species and millennia. She raised her violin and began to play, not just for the wolves this time, but for the world that was waking up to a new reality. The music echoed across the mountains, carried by the ancient technology hidden in the earth, reaching out to other sites, other guardians, other species ready to bridge the gap between worlds. The young wolf howled along, its voice joining hers in a duet that announced the dawn of a new age. An age where the boundaries between human and animal, civilization and wilderness, would blur and blend into something entirely new. And somewhere in the harmony of violin and howl, Olivia could hear her grandfather's voice carried on the wind. Music is the universal language. We just needed to learn how to listen. The story was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. But Olivia Reed, once a broken musician seeking solitude, had found her place in the Grand Symph.